Many state and local governments are now required to meet WCAG 2.1 Level AA, the standard for making websites, apps, and digital content accessible. So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, today we're talking to Mark Miller about that and more on Disability Deep Dive.
Welcome to Disability Deep Dive. I'm Jody.
And I'm Keith.
Today we're talking with Mark Miller of Inclusion Impact Accessibility about what digital accessibility actually requires and why so many organizations still treat it as an afterthought.
We get into WCAG, the W3C Accessibility and Maturity Model, and what it takes to make websites, documents, apps, and online content accessible for people with disabilities.
We also talk about the April 24th, 2026 DOJ Rule and what it means now that many state and local governments are required to meet these standards.
This is a practical conversation about planning, accountability, and making sure people can actually access the information and services they need.
Let's get into it with Mark Miller.
Before we get started, we'd like to begin with a quick visual description for listeners who are blind or have low vision. I'm Keith. I'm a white man with brown eyes, brown hair, a graying beard, and I'm wearing a black shirt.
I'm Jody, a white woman with dark blonde hair that's in a bun, and I'm wearing a black and white striped shirt and glasses.
And I'm Mark Miller, a white man with dark, peppered with gray hair, and a dark green shirt on, and a bit of a beard.
Well, Mark, for listeners who may be meeting you for the first time, can you introduce yourself, share a little bit about your work at Inclusion Impact Accessibility, and kind of what brought you into the world of digital accessibility?
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks, Keith. And thanks, Jody. First of all, I want to say thanks to both of you all for having me on the podcast. I'm a huge fan of the podcast, and I don't know if Keith has told you, Jody, but I was on one of the very first versions of these years and years ago.
Yes.
So it's super exciting to be back around and to be sort of in a different role, and it's great. And I just really appreciate all that you guys do in general, but also
hopefully
with this podcast.
Yeah. And hopefully a much better, more polished podcast than it was back then.
Oh my goodness. Like you're absolutely right. Like your website looks so professional. It's kind of funny because I think in the beginning I was doing a lot of podcasting and you were like looking at me going like, oh, how do we, and then I looked at you and I'm like, well, the student becomes the teacher, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
You guys got it all figured out. It's great. It really is. And you
Cool.
got great guests and you guys do a fantastic job, and it's an honor to be back. I'm Mark Miller. I'm founder and CEO of Inclusion Impact Accessibility. I think the easiest short way to describe us is we're a digital accessibility consultant. And what that means is that we help organizations make their digital assets. So think websites, mobile applications, documents, any sort of digital outreach that they're doing, where there's content that people consume or actions that people perform. We help them make sure that that's accessible to people with disabilities. And of course, that means a whole lot. There's guidelines, there's all sorts of things that go along with that. And we also help organizations improve their ability as an organization to output accessible digital assets. So it's not just about coming in as a consultant and giving them a service or a product that makes these things accessible. It's also about coming in and saying, here's the things that you guys can do as an organization to be accessible. So that's, in a very small little nutshell, that's the business. And I've been doing that, as you know, Keith, for 13 years now. My business is newer. It started last year, but my experience in the industry is 13 years. I'm also part of the W3C's working group that creates what's called the Accessibility Maturity Model. So AMM, if you ever hear me say AMM, I mean Accessibility Maturity Model. And that is a fancy sounding term that people might not know what it means. But what it means is it's a model by which you can evaluate an organization to understand their level of maturity. So what are they doing? Where are they in terms of their maturity? And when I say maturity, I mean their maturity, how mature they are around the capability to output accessible to digital assets, right? Websites, mobile applications. So, and what are the gaps? That's the important part of it. It's like, here you are, here's your ability to do it. What are the gaps and what could you do to improve that capability, to make it more consistent, more efficient, more measurable, all those things. So the W3C, this creating this model, is also the people that create the guidelines for accessibility. I'm sure, I know you guys know that. I'm sure a lot of your listeners do, but for folks who don't, there's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, that help people understand what they need to do to be more inclusive to people with disabilities in their digital assets. And then on top of that, I do a lot of podcasting, a lot of speaking in the industry, a lot of advocacy. The company's main, what we call our prime directive, is a value first prime directive. So we don't have a traditional marketing program as much as we try to put as much value out in the community as possible. And we try to provide value to anybody that we speak with, whether or not we're doing business with them. So we do a lot of that kind of community outreach as well. And I think the other thing that you ask is how I got in this business, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So, and I like this question. It's one I ask people a lot because it's so interesting to hear how people, like, why this such a niche industry, and it's one that you'll find if you kind of brush up against the industry, that the people who are in it are passionate about it. It's not just another job. It's actually sort of a passion. And I think you guys would reflect this, but for me, it's like, I feel lucky that I get to work in an industry that I'm so passionate about. So what happened is that I've got a sales and marketing background. I've got a publishing background. Back in the 90s, I actually published a magazine on art, theater, literature, music.
Nice.
And in doing that, it was just we were a small company doing that. And we built the entire technology infrastructure to do that. It was the first time in history where a couple of guys, it was me and a friend of mine, who's no longer with us. His name is Mark Lingenfelter. And he and I could do this because technology had reached the point where a couple of guys could sit in their basement or living room or whatever it was at the time and put together a magazine. We could provide what the printers needed electronically and go from there. So we had to build this infrastructure, and that brought me into technology. So at one point, my wife said, "You've been doing your own business for a while, and I want to do this thing with a friend of mine." And I said, "Okay, fair is fair." She went and did that, and I got a more corporate job in technology. And then I kind of bounced around technology and some other things for a while, and I love technology, so it was great. But I wouldn't say it was like fulfilling. It was okay, right? But whether or not I sold another Cisco switch or network cabling or memory upgrades, Microsoft licensing, like, it just was like, it was okay. I'm a geek, so I like the tech. And then I was also working in the mortgage industry, doing tech stuff in the mortgage industry, and also some sales stuff in the mortgage industry. And I ran into a guy there in that industry that I worked together with, called his name was Wes, and he went out of that industry and he started working for this company that did this digital accessibility thing. So this was probably plus or minus 2010.
Okay.
I think it was maybe 2008, somewhere in there, that he got this job. And he would tell me about it, and I'd be like, huh? What is this that you're talking about? You know? And then as I kind of like, and he and I would keep in touch because we would exchange ideas, from in a professional way, and we were kind of like a sounding board for each other and just friends, And I started to understand this, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is helping people with disabilities, and this is tech. To wrap together. This sounds cool. Now, when I had my magazine, one of my advertisers was a woman who was deaf.
Okay.
And this is a whole story in and of itself, but long story short, she was learned to lip read, she could speak, but we're like in our 20s at this time, and she was learning sign language, because when a person who's deaf doesn't know sign language, they end up sort of between two worlds, right? They're not quite part of the hearing world, they're not quite part of the deaf world. So she was learning sign language, and we became friends, and I started to learn sign language with her and became part of the deaf community. So I had like this real exposure
Nice.
early on to this. And then I myself have dyslexia and ADD.
Okay.
And I actually really didn't think about that in terms of disability back then, but all these things and my friend working in this industry kind of came together. And I went to him one day and I said, listen, I like what I'm doing, but I love what you're doing. Can you please find a way for me to get into this industry? Still not quite knowing what I was getting into, not quite fully understanding it, but understanding enough to know that this could be something that was meaningful to me, that I would go to bed every night feeling like I had done something meaningful. And but maybe I didn't even understand it that far yet. I just had an instinct that I knew that that's what I wanted to do. 3 years
Wow.
later, I spent 3 years back and forth with Wes. Almost got an interview with DQ at one point, but they made some changes. Back and forth. And 3 years later, he came to me and he said, Mark, and it was funny because I was starting to look for a change anyways. And my philosophy is always create multiple good options. Don't run away from a bad option. So I had really ramped up what I was doing at my current job, and I was looking at another option. And then I get this call from Wes, and he says, look, I just interviewed with this woman, and it was a great company. It's a small company that does what we do, exactly the kind of thing you're trying to get into. I decided not to take the job, though. But if I recommended you, they need you and they need your skill sets. Now, Jody, Keith, I don't know anything about accessibility. Nothing, right?
Right.
But I knew sales and marketing, and that's what they needed. So I interviewed with Kathy Wellman of Interactive Accessibility.
Yeah.
And thankfully, she took this chance on me. I think she was nervous because I didn't know anything about accessibility, But she took this chance on me. I learned quickly. She's like, can you learn? And, I was back there, like, every time HP or Cisco came out with something new, you had to do these courses. And so I could adapt anyways. And I'm like, so it was really cool when I got in. I'm like running deep on one subject versus like all these different things was really, really cool. But Kathy, her husband, Steve, who was also in the business, took me under their wing. I learned accessibility, and I had no idea how much I was going to match with this industry. Like, it was maybe 6 months in, and I literally had the thought of, I'm home and I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think when I joined Interactive Accessibility, there was 5 people. And then I think we went down to 3 at some point. And then we built from there. And 5 years later, so this would be 2013, I got into Interactive Accessibility. I learned so much from Kathy. To this day, if you said who's your mentor, I would refer back to her. I have a bunch.
The greats.
I have a bunch, but she just was an unbelievable voice, thought reader, and I feel so lucky that was kind of the crucible I was put in, was that company and under her direction to learn this industry, and very thankful to this day for her and for her leadership. And then the knowledge transfer over the course of 5 years. But we ended up selling to Vispero, and we merged with the Paciello group under Mike Paciello, who is another incredible. I didn't work directly under him like Kathy, but what a incredible influence in the industry he's been. And I use the term legend. I don't know if he likes it. I use the term legend, but I consider him to be a legend as well, in the industry as Kathy. And he and I have developed a really good professional respect and friendship over the years as well. But he wasn't part of the Paciello Group at the time. He'd sold as well and moved on. And then we worked under the Vispero umbrella for the next 8 years. So that cover it for you? Maybe I told you too much.
No, it's great.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a great story.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful story.
absolutely.
And it's a good story about just even finding your own path and finding what
Yeah.
fits, Yeah.
Yeah. And all the different things, how they kind of fell into place to,
Yep.
you don't always know why you're doing things or
Yeah.
what it's going to mean in the future. So
I'm
Yeah.
still never sure why I do most anything.
me neither. My wife's definitely not sure why I do most of the things I do. But yeah, no, I feel fortunate, and I just think I do appreciate like all the experiences and the way they came together to bring me to this podcast.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with it. A lot of people who work in this industry have a passion for it, and that's so important at your job. But what I wanted to break down some of the terms that you said in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
They can be, big to people. They hear them all the time, but they may not fully understand. So, they hear WCAG and can, get a little bit overwhelmed. In plain language, what is it and why does it matter so much right now?
Well, when I hear WCAG, I still get overwhelmed. So I don't know if we're going to unoverwhelm people, but yeah, no, thanks for coming back around that. It's so easy to just start spitting out these terms, particularly when I'm sitting here with you and Keith, who I know these things. So the WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and they're a set of guidelines created by a volunteer group called the W3C, which stands for the World Wide Web Consortium. And even if you don't know them, you know them because they're the people responsible for the HTML standard. So when you log onto a website and your browser shows you, Jody and Keith, what it shows you, it's the HTML behind there that browser is able to understand and represent that visual. And I'm talking visually right now. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are a set of guidelines that says, hey, if you also want that background structure to represent things to people who may experience that website differently. So maybe a person who's blind is using a screen reader like NVDA or JAWS, and that content's being represented to them in spoken word versus or auditorily versus through a monitor visually, then it needs to be programmatically correct for that as well. And that's part of what the WCAG guidelines would help inform. It says things like, hey, if you've got a video with auditory content in there, you need captions, because a person who has a hearing impairment is not going to be able to understand that content if it's not represented in text. And it has a lot of things in there around keyboard navigability and all this stuff, so that people with mobility impairments and can navigate and around how the content should be presented, so that people with cognitive impairments, which actually fall in that category because of dyslexia, that it's fine for them to navigate. So it helps organizations understand, at least at a base level, what they need to do to make sure that their content is perceivable in these different ways as well. One short bit about it, I don't want to get too in the weeds because it's not an terribly exciting subject. Maybe it is to the three of us, but the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, if you hear somebody say level A, level AA, level AAA, they come in three different sort of flavors. A being baseline, like, hey, it is not working at all if it's not at least A. AA being what most organizations, what's we consider to be market for conformance, and what a lot of regulations point to is that AA level. And then there's kind of this AAA that's like, hey, if you really want to go the extra mile, there's this AAA, and then beyond that, you would have to test with people with disabilities and really sharpen the experience even further. So does that cover it, Jody? Does you think?
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, great.
Perfect. Great job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you get past this. That once you get past like the acronym and the terminology, you kind of see that this stuff really shows up in so many places online. So when you get that foundation in place, let's kind of talk instead about where people run into barriers more often. So when you hear people talk about digital accessibility, of course they often think about websites, but this also includes PDFs and forms, apps, videos, all sorts of digital content. Where do you see the biggest accessibility problems show up most often?
Well, that's, it really is the web. And it's with that HTML, it's with everything we talk about, because if you think about how vast it is. Like every business has at least one, if not multiple websites. Every organization out there that maybe they're not a business, but they're just an organization. Individuals, like if you love to cook and you want to start a cooking blog, you've got a website out there, right? And then, never mind the things like social media and all that. So we are producing content on the web incredibly rapidly. Every day that content increases. And with AI, it's increasing even more rapidly.
Yeah.
So, and there's a whole talk around AI, which we can get into if you want, but I'll leave it for now. But, and it's the way that we've taught people to create websites doesn't include accessibility. This is our fight as accessibility professionals. When you go to school and you learn in school how to create a website, it's becoming better and more of a thing. But traditionally, that class wasn't like, and here's how you make it accessible, or this is the accessible best practice. You see more and more of that. I mean, you've got wonderful places like the Rochester Institute of Technology in New York. They're like, half is like, here's how you do technology stuff, and the other half is a school for people who are deaf, right? So schools like that really are leaders in this. I know people that have come out of that are like, in fact, I sat down and had lunch about a month ago with a friend of my son's, Joe Agnelli, who is a front-end web person, and he can talk about accessibility all day long because, he did get some of that. So it's not completely absent, but it's not the norm.
Yeah.
So it would be the web. Sure. But the other things to think about, Keith, just to round this out, I'm going to give you a more interesting answer. One of the things to think about, too, is that there's a lot of what I would call enclosed systems. A lot of people would refer to it as kiosks. So you think about when you travel and you go to print out your bag tags at that kiosk, right? You have to go in, you have to put in your credit card or your ID or whatever, and you can print out all your stuff. That is a piece of hardware with software in it, and it needs to be accessible. And these things are becoming prominent, right? Now you get past security, and what do you do? You go to get a snack, and there's 5 terminals, and maybe somebody wandering around in that shop that can help you with one of those terminals. But you're now expected to do self-checkout using an enclosed system. So that would be the flip side of your question, Keith. That's the new frontier of inaccessible or hopefully accessible technology. So it's starting to stretch into that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, that gets us, we know a problem exists, and it's whether people will do something meaningful to address the problem. I know there's some requirements that are coming up in April that are coming into effect. And so what separates organizations that take this digital accessibility seriously, from the beginning, and ones that are kind of backtracking or just, ticking off boxes because, it's required?
Yeah, so it's a really big subject. So I'll try to boil it down. But it's an important one, right? Like you're really kind of like putting your finger on kind of the pulse of I think what a lot of organizations sort of, I'll say, struggle with, right? Like is how to, because if you're a business, you've got a lot of competing priorities.
Yeah.
We can sit here and be like, oh, this is important because it is. But, we can't deny that a business is really trying to juggle a lot of different things. So they're always trying to figure out, and some of them do it really well, and some of them don't do it as well, and all of that, but where this fits in those priorities. And then you brought up a really good point, and that's sort of like building accessibility in from the beginning versus this sort of retrofit. I'll go into both of those things. So first of all, there's a lot of reasons why businesses might embark on accessibility, and you brought up a really good one, Jody, and that's that there's a regulation, and the regulation I think that you're referring to is Title II of the ADA, which says that state and local government entities. So think about your town, your state, anything that's funded or run by them needs to be accessible to people with disabilities. And the really cool thing, so this is under the ADA, right? So Title III of the ADA says places of public accommodation. So, and that's a federal federal standpoint. So like, or it's from everybody's standpoint, right? But if you think about like a bank or a hospital or anything that serves the public needs to be accessible to people with disabilities under this federal guideline, right? And the Title III has always said places of public accommodation need to be accessible, and then there's no enforcement. It's enforced in the courts, it's litigated. So the litigation, the case precedent is pointed to these WCAG guidelines that we just explained, right? The cool thing about Title II is they actually came out and said WCAG 2.1, WCAG's at 2.2 right now, but they said this 2.1 version of WCAG at the AA level, this is something that you can use. So Title II is really cool in that it's given more clarity, Jody, to the businesses. Okay. So there's a little like more assuredness in terms of the direction that they go to. And then they also said, Title II said by tomorrow, so April 24th, 2026, if you have 50,000 people or more in the entity. Okay. So they use the word entity because what did we talk about? A town library or whatever, or a state, this or that, right? That you have until that date to be accessible. So a lot of organizations have been doing the first thing that you talked about, which is retrofitting, going out to the things they've already built and said, we need to make these accessible. That's very inefficient, right? So if we use like a car analogy, like if you buy a car and then you're like, I want a turbocharger on my car, or I now decided I need heated seats or a backup camera or something like that wasn't part of the original package of the car. It's much more expensive for you to go and add that to your car afterwards than it would be if that was installed in the factory, right? So the soapbox we get on is like, yes, you need to retrofit all this stuff, but going forward, and this is where the maturity models, all that, we're coming back around, right? We're coming back around. That's where we go, okay, now when you create the designs for your website, if you make sure you pay attention to accessibility and design them with accessibility in mind, that's going to be much more efficient and less expensive. And then if we educate your developers and we put requirements around them to code with accessibility the best they can, that's going to be more expensive. And then when the quality assurance people get in there, they're checking for it. So anything that people might not have quite got right, because there's bugs and people don't think it's perfectly, that's everything, not just accessibility. They're checking for it, that's going to be better. And then what happens is that it's way more efficient and cost effective because you built it in from the beginning. And by the way, you're doing a bunch of different checks. Quality assurance is looking for a bunch of different things. Developers have a bunch of different best practices. So having accessibility be part of that it's just in lockstep. It almost becomes like not an extra effort. And or once you have it implemented, right? Implementing it and getting to that point takes effort, right? And then the other brilliant thing is that things don't enter into production, which means you don't put a website out there that is initially inaccessible that now needs to become accessible. So you don't, I'm going to use a fancy term here, but you don't enter production with as much risk as you otherwise do. So not only is it more efficient to do, but it's safer from a risk standpoint to do it. So I think that kind of covers all the different things that you're talking about. And the last thing I will say is that whatever your reason is for doing accessibility, zoom out. And what I mean by that, I have this blog post on my website called The Unified Theory of Digital Accessibility. It means if you do it for compliance reasons, zoom out and look at all the other reasons why it's good. Look at the return on investment. Look at if you're a business, look at the increase in brand perception and your market response, and do it because it's part of your company culture to be a good steward and all that kind of stuff. So if you then zoom out and you look at all these other reasons why it's a really good idea, you're much more likely to sustain it. You're much more likely to put the initial effort it takes to build accessibility into all your processes, company, government entity, whatever you are, Does that answer your question, Jody?
Yes, great answer.
I'm glad I can bring it around to all those things.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, and kind of maybe even going a little bit a little bit further into it, one of the, unfortunately, a side effect of the fact that so many businesses don't build their websites accessible in the first place and need to suddenly have a solution, and they need, how do I fix this right away? There's unfortunately like a whole industry now of like these quote unquote accessibility overlays that, sell, full compliance, full accessibility. And unfortunately it's just not the case. So, it's a whole other market that's kind of built to claim to solve a problem that it doesn't actually solve, unfortunately. So, in lieu of going that route, I mean, what does it look like for a business, a developer, whoever, to actually build in that accessibility from the start, like from, concept to design, to deployment, like, what is that, without getting too deep into the weeds, like, what does it look like to see accessibility just, from the start?
It looks like everything else. And that's the brilliance behind it, right? So the effort is in building the processes in the first place, right? The effort is in educating the developer. The effort is in creating the policies and procedures. The effort is in governance, right? Now that we've said this is what we should do, are we actually doing it? How well is it working? Once it becomes baked in, once you hit what we would call an optimized state of maturity, there's a bunch of different ways to say it, but we'll say it that way. It's like everything else. So when responsive design came into the picture, right? Responsive design is where you could have one website, one set of code, HTML, right? And if you went, it changed based on the portal size that you were using. So if you went on your desktop and you had your nice big monitor, it showed it to you one way. But if you were at the grocery store hitting that website on your cell phone, it showed it to you another way, which would, in those ways, were appropriate for the portal size. It was the same thing. People like, how do we do this? Let's hire a consultant. Let's try and retrofit our existing website, blah, blah, all those things. But the world liked it so much that it is now just the way that we develop. And people would be like, it's not any extra effort because it's just the way we do stuff, right? So that's kind of the brilliance behind it all, is that once you get to that state, Keith, it looks like everything else. It becomes baked in and it becomes a part of it. And for the developer, it looks like best practices, right? So when you put an image into a website, you use like an image element, right? And there's an attributes within that, and you just automatically put what's called an alt attribute that describes the image, so that somebody using a screen reader can hear a description of that image and get the same benefit as somebody who can look at the image, right? It's just habit. It's just part of it. And so that's really what it looks like. The one thing I think to point out is it doesn't necessarily eliminate the need for a third-party objective audit in the end. And part of that is one, you want to make sure, just like anything else, you want to make sure an expert looks at it and says like, hey, this is pretty good. I found a couple things to slip through. It should be easy to fix. Here you go. And also because of the compliance aspect of it, oftentimes you really are looking for that authority that a third-party objective party gives you. So if something does happen and you need to defend yourself, right? You need to be defensible. You can say, look, we disagree with this allegation because we actually have done everything that we're supposed to, and here's the evidence, so that stuff kind of will be a cost and happen at the end. But having them not come back with a bunch of stuff that's wrong that you then have to fix, retrofit, that's good. So does that help, Keith? Does that kind of answer?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean,
if
this was like,
right?
Yeah,
it is. And I love the answer. I think it's a brilliant answer that makes it just like everything else. And it becomes standard, it becomes best practice. But the audit makes sense too, because if you're, this isn't 25, 30 years ago when all of our web pages are just pretty much static text and images. And I could make an accessible website all day like that with no problem. But websites nowadays are pretty much apps. I mean, they're dynamic. There's so exactly that, like, you can do your best to be as accessible as possible, but there's just like
Yeah.
anything needs to be like bug checked or reviewed or whatever. It's just another part of the process of the review. I think is the accessibility. You got to make sure it's all there because there's a lot that can go wrong.
100%.
You know, the best
Absolutely.
intention, but it can
And
go
you
wrong.
and you brought up the right thing, Keith. Like you can another way to think about accessibility is bugs that affect people with disabilities. So if you think about that process that's already in place to just find and fix bugs and try to avoid as many of them entering into that production site in the first place as possible, it's just an adjunct to that process, with some compliance behind it.
Well, to close one more loop that we opened at the beginning, let's talk a little bit about the W3C accessibility maturity model, and how it can help organizations move from reacting to accessibility problems to actually building this long-term approach.
Yeah, so thank you, because I love the subject, right?
Good.
We all have kind of our little areas of the accessibility world that we get passionate about. And one of the things that I kind of, my geeky area to dig into is this organizational maturity, which is why I'm part of the group. And I'm fortunate to be in a group that's led by a gentleman named Dave Fazio. And we've got some just incredible, and then Sherry. I always mess up Sherry's last name, so I apologize. Sorry. Ballin. Do you want to say Keith Ballin Harbor? We're not even reading it. I have to look at it. It's a hyphenated name.
Yeah.
But anyways, she's an absolutely incredible voice in accessibility and just an unbelievable contributor to this industry, and has made just. Anyways, I can't say enough about her and a bunch of the other people that are in this group, and so. Maturity models are a thing that exists, right? So you have like a couple models out there. The ones that I really tracked were CMM and CMMI, so capability maturity models, which they actually started in the 80s, and then they became CMMI, capability maturity integration, in the 90s. And these models sprang up, and they sprang up in places like the Navy and Microsoft and all this stuff to evaluate an organization's ability to do something. And it could be anything. So in this case, we're talking about to do digital accessibility. And what that really means is to output accessible digital assets. And that's all the stuff that we've been talking about. Right. And the way that these models work is you assess the organization, and you used a great term, Jody, and that's, I think you said this. You said, I can't remember how you said it. Did you say ad hoc or something close to that? I'm gonna say you said ad hoc.
Sure.
But it's this initial effort, right? Like
This isn't recorded. No one will ever know.
yeah, it's just the three of us.
Yeah.
As I was saying it, I'm like, did you say ad hoc or something else? But whatever you said, it kind of like it tingled my spidey senses, and I'm like, oh, it's a great term. But anyway, so and what that means is that somebody's gone like, oh, we need this to be accessible. And somebody's been like, oh, let me grab the guidelines. Let me hire a consultant. Let me do this. And we've made this thing accessible. And then over in the organization, somebody else working on something else has done the same thing. And so you've got kind of these two different areas of the organization that are, have figured out how to do this thing called accessibility with their asset, right? So the model would look at something like that and say, well, you're at an ad hoc stage, or to use the terms from the W3Cs, they call that a launch phase, right? You're not in, they go inactive, launch, integrate, optimize. So you're not inactive, you know about accessibility and you're trying to do stuff, you're launching it. And that launch effort is an ad hoc effort. People are just by the seat of their pants figuring it out, which is beautiful and fantastic, right? But it's not sustainable. So, and that's oftentimes where you start to look at a model is when you're in that ad hoc stage. But we would look, how are you doing this? Why are you doing it? Do you have this implemented? Do you have that implemented, right? Like you're doing accessibility. Yes, we're doing accessible. How do you do it? Well, when the product's done, we go and have an assessment done and we fix it all. Okay. Do you have any policy? Do you have a policy and for your developers to try and include it? No, we don't have that yet. All right, well, there's an area of improvement. So it's looking for those gaps. And once you identify those gaps and you start closing those gaps, you move through these levels. So like I said, with the W3C's model, the levels go in order: inactive, launch, integrate, optimize. So I've launched, I'm having assessments done, I'm fixing stuff, but now I've created these policies, and in design, we're reviewing the designs for accessibility. We've trained our developers. We've got a policy in place. We've got a policy in purchasing. When the purchasers buy a third-party tool to integrate into our website, we evaluate it for accessibility. That is, now we've integrated accessibility into our workflows. And then optimize is we've evaluated the effectiveness of that integration, and we've improved it based on those findings. That's a simple way to say it, but it's a model that allows that kind of process. The other way I'll put this is you got three things, right? You've got the why, you've got the what, and you've got the how. The model is the what. The why is, why do you need to do this? Well, we're being sued. Title II is coming down the line, so on and so forth. The what, or the how, is the model. The what is the model. The what is, what are we doing well right now, and where's our gaps? What can we do to improve? And then the how is a roadmap that you would build that the model informs. So that, Jody, is kind of where this all leads to, is this ultimate roadmap that gives you a set of incremental actions. And I love to say incremental because there's no light switch. You don't decide to do this and do it all at once. If you even have a notion of doing it all at once or even rapidly, it's probably not going to be great. One step at a time is fine. And every step you take is a little more accessibility and a little more access. And that's fantastic.
Absolutely. And I think that's perfect. I think that's what a lot of companies miss, is that with this model, they do get, like you said, a roadmap, and that will help you, if you haven't started it at the beginning, even if you are starting it at the beginning, having these actionable steps that you can follow to make it happen is great.
And with every single one, you become more effective and more efficient.
Absolutely.
Less money.
Indeed.
Yep.
Less money, less time.
Right.
Wow. Well, Mark, before we wrap up, we have a second segment in our show that we call The Deep Cut, where we talk about media in disability spaces. So we always like to ask our guests, is there a book, a TV show, film, song, anything like that that's resonated with you lately that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh my gosh, I could go on and on and on and on. I'm going to start in a weird place.
Okay.
Okay.
Go for it.
Have you guys been watching Bridgerton?
Yes, absolutely.
The new season of Bridgerton.
Yes.
So my wife and I watch Bridgerton, and I got another one for you here too. And there's a woman that is a character in that. She's one of the maids. So the premise of Bridgerton is it's society, right? Elite society. It's kind of fictional representation of elite society that's sort of interesting and cute. And so you've got the elite, and then you've got these maids, and one of the maids is doesn't have her full arm, right? You know what I'm talking about, Jody.
Yes.
And here's why I love this. She's just a maid on the show that doesn't have a full arm. There's no mention of it.
Yeah.
There's no value signaling around it.
Yeah.
It is just a proper, diverse representation of the human condition, and it's not addressed. It's not talked about. And there was another show. This is a really cool show. It took place in Boston, I live in New Hampshire, about an hour north of the city, and it was called 30. I have dyslexia, so I'm not good at remembering numbers, but 36 days. This is an interesting one. Watch this show.
Okay.
Oh, if you're watching it, don't watch it with the kids around. It's not that kind of show.
Gotcha.
I think it's on Amazon or something like that. And but I was watching this with my wife, and I'm like, "Did you see that?" And she's like, "What?" And they had an office scene And by the way, if you're part of the show, this is a huge shout out to you guys, and I really appreciate that. And in the background, out of focus, was all the workers in like the cubicles and the desks, and one of them was in a mobile wheelchair. Again, no explanation, no nothing, just the extras they pulled on board to have in the background of the scene with the main characters included people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And I know it's a weird little place to go with that question, but those moments for me are such hopeful moments. And there's 1,000 examples of that. But being in tears during the pandemic, flying home from the CSUN conference, wearing a mask with a college kid flying home on either side of me, tears streaming into my mask while I watched CODA is a moment I will never forget. That's Marley Madsen, who's an incredible deaf actor, and a whole cast that came out of largely out of Gallaudet, so very authentically represented through the deaf in signing American Sign Language community. A wonderful representation. CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adult. So this premise that in this family they had two kids, two deaf parents had two kids, one deaf, one hearing, and kind of it was about the pressures that's put on the only hearing. It's about a lot of things, but I think the CODA, the title of it, was about the pressures put on the youngest sibling, which was a daughter, and her ending up being interpreter to this family, and them not wanting her to go away, and hard for her to express herself while sort of being a part of this deaf family, and her being a part of deaf culture, but also trying to find her way in hearing culture and all these things. But boy, I get choked up even thinking about the movie. Yeah. So Marley Madsen, first of all, if you don't know her story, learn her story. But CODA's, everybody should see that.
It's on our list. It's on our list to discuss.
Yep. One of the things we're going to talk about. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Good choice.
But I could, it's a great question. I appreciate the question, but man, could I keep going?
Yeah.
I mean, never mind the blog posts and the content that's just put out there by the people in our community that doesn't rise to the sort of Hollywood level that I just talked about.
Sure.
And the reason why I went that direction is because these are the things that everybody can look for and appreciate. Is I think these moments in these movies, and
agreed.
There's a lot of incredible. It's a great world we live in. There's a lot of incredible stuff out there. We talk about accessibility not being done well, but as much as we talk about that, there's things that are done well, including accessibility, including these moments like that. So thanks for that question.
Yep. Ethan, I keep coming back to every time to the Pit. I don't know if you've watched that show.
Oh, yes, I've watched every episode.
And we're constantly coming back to the representation in it. Yeah.
The psychiatrist,
It's
and again,
one of many.
He's in a wheelchair, no mention of it.
Yeah.
That's an incredible show. Thank you for bringing that one up.
Yeah.
It is.
We really love it.
Yeah.
But I absolutely adore that handling of people with disabilities. The other interesting one, now we're on a tangent. We're just making a second podcast here. But the other interesting one is Will Trent.
Will Trent.
I've heard of the show, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. So the main character, Will Trent, who is he's part of GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigations. Okay. But he's dyslexic, like me.
Okay.
And which I really like. And it's not the kind of like what we were talking about. Like, it's not like it's just placed and it is the way it is. Like, they handle it, which is another beautiful. It's like CODA handles the subject, right?
Yeah, sure.
So this show handles the subject, which is another beautiful thing, right? All these things are important, and it's great. He's very profoundly dyslexic. Like, the experience that they portray in that show is different than my experience. He has a real hard time reading. I learned to read. I can read fine. I am not a fast reader. But my reading comprehension, it took me a while to get there, but I'm pretty good now. I still like to listen to stuff versus reading it. But he's on the, I don't know, dyslexic spectrum, if we can say that where he can't read. But anyways, that's a great show just to explore, that explores that as well.
We'll check it out.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
But the Pitt, I forgot about
Well,
the Pitt. Thank you. See, that's a testament to the
There's-
Pitt, right? Like it
yeah.
was so normative
Right.
to me that I wasn't even, and we like literally just got through watching that. Is
Yeah.
there another
Yep,
example in the
yep,
Pitt
same.
other than the
Oh, there's a
psychiatrist?
bunch. There's actually a bunch.
Well, there's the neurodiversity with a sister.
Mhm. The
Yes.
patient that comes in who's deaf and they're having such a
Oh, I
hard time
forgot.
communicating with her,
That
and
was a
how they just keep
fantastic
putting it off.
Yeah, that was fantastic
Yes.
representative of
Yes.
that challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the interesting thing about the doctor with a sister who's autistic is the sister, I believe, has autism. I think that, I don't know if they say that outright or not. I can't remember. But I think the implication is the doctor is also on the spectrum, just in a different place.
Correct. That's true.
And,
yes.
and that's never
I agree.
spoken, but they do a very good
Nope.
job of floating that out there and showing the different lived experiences the two people on the spectrum, on different places of the spectrum might have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Really
the
nuanced,
actor
but
is-
but it's great.
The actor is as well. She's on the spectrum as well, which is both actors, in
Oh, are
fact,
they?
of those roles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't dive deep enough to. I mean, I kind
Yeah.
of suspected that, but I'm thanks for that confirmation.
Yeah.
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 Excellent. Great stuff. There's
I
some
love
there's
it.
some good stuff out there. You're right. Well, Mark, thanks so much for joining us,
Yes.
helping us break all this down in a way that feels clear and practical and grounded. The kind of stuff that people really need to know to get moving with accessibility in their
Yeah.
websites and other digital products.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough for having me on the podcast. And Keith, you and I go way back, and you've been an advocate of mine, and I hope you feel like I've been an advocate of yours.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Same.
so I really appreciate that. And Jody, we just met today.
Yes.
But you and I have a future,
Yes, definitely.
like Keith
Definitely.
and I do, and I really,
There you go.
I really appreciate this, and I appreciate the questions, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you
Same
so
to
much.
Thanks. Yep. Thanks.
You're welcome.
After the break, we'll dive into this week's Deep Cut.
Today's Deep Cut, we're talking about the 1932 film Freaks, directed by Todd Browning. Before we get into it, we want to give a strong content note. The title itself uses a word that is harmful by today's standards, and the film also includes outdated language, disturbing imagery, violence, exploitation, and scenes that frame people with disabilities and body differences through fear, shock, and spectacle.
This is a difficult film to talk about because it can be read in more than one way. In 1932, it was unusual to see people with disabilities and body differences on screen as real performers, workers, friends, partners, and members of a community. But watching it now, we also have to talk about the harm. The film uses disability and body difference to create discomfort, and it comes from a time when people with disabilities were often treated as public curiosities instead of full people.
So today we're looking at Freaks through two lenses, what it meant in 1932 and what it feels like to watch in 2026. Because this is not a simple, quote, good representation or, quote, bad representation conversation. It's more complicated than that, because apparently one film decided to be an ethical obstacle course. So, when you watched Freaks, how did you balance the 1932 lens with the 2026 lens? What felt groundbreaking for its time and what felt harmful watching it now?
Yeah, we mentioned, in 1932, it was unusual to see people with disability or body differences on screen at all, especially, portraying them with relationships and routines and feelings and lives that, weren't hidden away. But watching it now, there are parts that are extremely uncomfortable. The title itself lends to a very harmful word. And the film often depends on the audience's reacting to these people's bodies as something unusual and shocking. And it's hard to separate from the way that disabled people and people with body differences have been treated in real life. So for me, it's, the balance is recognizing that the film did something rare for its time, about being honest and that, but, being rare doesn't automatically mean it's respectful. And, in 1932, they may have challenged some viewers simply by putting these performers on screen, but in, 2026, there's deeper questions that need to be asked about dignity, consent, and whether
Yeah.
people are being treated as, full human beings.
Yeah, sure. At the time, it seemed important to have them on screen, but just having someone on screen is not enough. There's a lot more that goes with it, and so we have him here as a film that's historically important, but still pretty harmful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the film seems to challenge the idea that disabled characters are the ones the audience should fear. Cleopatra and Hercules, two characters, are
Yes.
cruel throughout the film. But while the performers have loyalty and community, there's a reversal at the end. Did that reversal at the end work for you, or did the horror framing kind of get in the way?
Yeah, it's. I mean, there were aspects of both, I guess. It's it was interesting to see how the Cleopatra and Hercules were, they were the bad guys, right? They were the ones that were, causing problems. And all the other performers, the individuals with disabilities in the show, they are, very loyal to each other. They're protective of Hans, who's one of the main characters in the movie. You can feel that there's a sense of community among them. The problem is that the film still uses disabled bodies and body differences as an element of horror, essentially, and really more so at the end. So yeah, the reversal works in some ways, but that horror framing weakens it. And what I felt was like there were parts of it that I was like, well, this is an interesting portrayal, especially considering the date, 1932 at the time. Like, wow, this is interesting what they're showing here. And then the horror part at the end, maybe just kind of throw my arms in the air and go, nope, you ruined it. It's all
Right.
it's all gone now. It's all a mess. Yeah, it definitely weakened things because the idea is that the audience is supposed to feel uneasy because these individuals look different,
Yeah, I remember seeing it for the first time, and it's marketed as a horror film. And,
Right.
so I came into it as the assumption of we're going to see people with disabilities, how horrible, and horrific. And then I'm watching it and I'm like, this isn't very scary. This doesn't seem
Yeah,
like a horror film to
same.
me. And then dun, dun,
No.
dun, here comes the ending. And I was like,
Yep.
that's what they
Yep.
mean.
Right.
Yeah,
I was wondering. Yep. Same thing. I was just like, why is this horror? This is ridiculous. Just because
Yeah.
they have disabilities?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay. Now I get it.
Ay.
Well, so the world of like the circus sideshow, I guess, it was definitely exploitative, but for some performers, it also offered stable work and income, even travel and community. And, this is at a time when people with disabilities didn't have a lot of options. So how do we talk about that history honestly without romanticizing it?
Yeah. I think the way to do that is to not make it simple. It's more
Right.
nuanced than that.
Absolutely.
The sideshow world was built on, people being stared at. It was marketed, come see this oddity, this unusual thing is entertainment. And there's absolutely harm in that. And it should be,
Sure.
said very plainly. But at the same time,
Yes.
we don't want to erase these people who worked in that world. They had careers, they earned money, they traveled, built families and relationships and had independence for themselves, which, before that time really wasn't available to them. So, that doesn't make it right or fair or respectful, but, the people that were part of this, were making those choices where they had very limited options. So,
Right.
we can hold both of those truths, that it was harmful and also good in some aspects. And we can recognize them being exploited without treating them like victims in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one thing the film does well, and I think we talk about it more in a bit, but is that they do show a real sense of community among
Yeah.
the members of the Sideshow, which was really interesting and to some degree really heartwarming. Again, you have to look at it in the right context of things, but for some people, I can understand it at the time. It might have been a good choice for them, considering the options at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of, we've mentioned this in the first season of Disability Deep Dive. This is where the term, midget came from, was this era, this time period. And a lot of other slurs, like the title of this movie, kind of developed and became popular in culture and are still here today, even though that culture is gone away. There's still, lasting effects and ramifications of things that happen then that are still, in our lexicon of the world. So that's interesting to me.
For sure. The historical content of all of this stuff should definitely be like kept in mind and noted while watching it, and what is true about today's world and for the improvement, but also unfortunately what's still there that's bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one of us scene is probably one of the most famous moments of the film. The performers are trying to welcome Cleopatra and she responds to them and their welcome with disgust. What does that scene say to you about belonging to a community that maybe you weren't born into or have been a part of?
Yeah, and that's one of the main scenes I was just kind of alluding to, that, where there's this very strong sense of community among the members of the Sideshow group. It's the scene is so important because they're not rejecting her. In this case, Cleopatra's the one who's, quote, different, right?
Yeah, right.
And they're inviting her in because there's a relationship of sorts between Cleopatra and Hans, and they are sort of welcoming her into their world because her and the two of them are together.
Yeah.
And so it's meant to be this welcoming, nice, sweet thing. But Cleopatra just shows immense disgust.
Yeah.
And is so angry. She clearly sees them all as very much beneath her, even though there they are, like trying to accept her and bring her into, their world.
Yeah.
Which again, that community is important to them. And, it turns the audience's attention back toward the idea of prejudice, who is treated as acceptable, who is not. It's a pivotal scene. It's a very pivotal scene for a number of reasons in the movie.
Yeah, she can work alongside them and earn money alongside them, but she definitely doesn't want to be associated with them in a personal context. God forbid. But that scene is pretty powerful and pivotal in the movie, because that's when things start to take a turn.
Absolutely. Well, so another thing that makes Freak so complicated is that it featured real performers with disabilities and body differences, which is, very rare in Hollywood, especially at the time.
Yeah.
So did that make the film feel more human, feel more exploitative, or maybe, again, a little bit of both?
Yeah, again, it's the dual language. It's both at the same time, which makes this movie so complicated to talk about.
Yeah.
There's something very powerful in the fact that these are real performers that we're viewing. They're not actors pretending to have these disabilities, which is something we talk about on the show quite a bit. It's something that we want to see happening more often and be the standard. So you feel like the characters have their own presence, their own personalities. That's, the way they move through the world is real. And that matters, especially in 1932, because, people a lot of times were out of public view unless they were in this type of situation. But the film is smart. The director is smart, knowing that the audiences are looking at these performers as something unusual. They market the movie that way.
Right.
You're going to be astonished and horrified and all
it's
these
named
things.
Freaks. I mean, come on, like that was their intent.
Absolutely. So when it gives the performers this humanity, Then like many films at that time didn't have,
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword. So again, just because they're there doesn't make the film respectful. I don't, a lot of
Right.
people say, oh, well, they used real performers. Yeah, that's great. They used real performers with disabilities. That doesn't make it, automatically okay in a pro disability, film. So
No.
I think that's what makes it worth discussing and viewing from 1932 in a 2026 dual lens, because it's so complex and so dual both sides. And that's, I'm glad we picked it to talk about.
For sure. And that unfortunately that changes near the end, right?
Yeah.
That sort of both sides thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The ending is where things become extremely uncomfortable. The performers protect Hans. He's one of them. They love him. But the revenge that they take on Cleopatra is filmed like a horror film. The lighting, the camera moves, everything it changes, and the audience goes, "Oh, this is what's
Right.
happening." How do you feel about that ending?
Boy, it was, sorry, it takes, this is such a, this was just very hard to even put into words in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so, okay. Emotionally, the story is framing the performers as protecting Hans after, Cleopatra totally humiliates him and tries to really physically harm him. Right.
Yeah.
The problem is it becomes very uncomfortable the way the scenes, like the ending scenes, are filmed. Like what was bright and open at sudden, during the majority of the film
Yeah.
suddenly becomes dark and foreboding.
Yeah.
And now these individuals with disabilities who showed this like group support and camaraderie and even trying to invite someone outside of their group in, now they are, and I'm using words like to frame it the way the movies, they're monsters.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like, they're meant to look different and scary, and like they're plotting and they're going to attack, and who knows what kind of harm they're going to do to her. And it just, I'm going back and forth throughout the whole movie, and I'm really trying to understand it. I'm like, what is going on here? There's so much depth here. Like, I feel like this could be looked at so many different ways. And then that all starts happening, and I'm just watching it like, no,
Yeah.
oh my, this is how it wraps up. And it just, I was just so disgusted and uncomfortable with that at the end. Cause they become monsters, and it reinforces every prejudice that the film seems to sometimes challenge. Like there were some moments where I'm like, wow, for 1932, they're kind of, showing a different side than I was expecting. No, they totally ruin it. They totally ruin it at the end,
It goes from, happiness and look at how fulfilled and rich their lives could be to not only are they horrible to look at and see, but they're really horrible people inside, and you should be very afraid,
Yes.
And it just plants this, you never know what's going to happen, Yeah. The ending.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was like whiplash.
Yeah, it was. And it's funny because then when I thought about it later, I was like, in the beginning of the movie, in the very beginning, they allude to that. I didn't really see it as being like something that was going to be horrific, or like, that they were going to be like attacking or deadly or like monstrous. But it's the language in the beginning is sort of like, you realize what they're really saying is, don't mess with them because you will pay.
Yeah.
Again, they're not monsters. This is not like, a creature feature, from like the 70s or 80s where, I don't know. It was just,
you see where they got their horror genre from. They went straight to it.
They did. So when we watch Freaks now, what do you think modern viewers should take away from it about disability, representation, and the way media can both challenge a prejudice and carry that same prejudice all at once?
Okay, so for me, the seeing Freaks for the first time, it's kind of personal because I saw Freaks in a film class, sitting in a room of people. I was the only person with a physical disability, and to have dwarfism. We haven't mentioned, but the main character has dwarfism. So it changes the experience for me than it would for someone without that lived experience. So, you're in film class and you're talking about framing and, the history and what the director was trying to say and the cinematography and all that. But, those conversations are great in that context, but for me, it was, I'm in a room thinking about, what are they laughing at? What are they uncomfortable with? Whether the people watching are understanding that this is not just an old movie, wondering about the context that they're seeing about the people with disability. It was a very different framing for me. So, watching it now, again, years and years and years later, I still feel the film is historically important as a film because of some of the things that it did. But I think people need to be aware of the context of it in modern 2026, that it could be important historically, but we still need to view it in the correct context. Gone with the Wind is another example of a movie that, it has its place in film history, but it also has its place in how we view the world and how the world has changed and what's prejudice and wrong with how we see things then and still now. So, study the film, but really talk to disabled people on the representation and, talk to people who can relate to what the film is about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a reminder that representation has always been very complicated. But, progress means asking better questions about power and dignity and who gets to control the story, because clearly they were not in control of the story at all.
Absolutely. Well, Freaks is not an easy film to talk about, and maybe that's why it still matters. It shows us a moment in film history when people with disabilities and body differences were visible on screen, but it also shows how that visibility was shaped by fear, staring, and exploitation.
Watching it in 2026 means we can recognize its place in history while still being honest about the harm in its language, framing, and horror imagery.
That's why it belongs in our deep cut conversation. It gives us a chance to ask how representation has changed and what has stayed with us and why being seen is only the beginning. The deeper question is whether people are being seen with dignity, agency, and full humanity.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Disability Deep Dive. We want to thank Mark for helping us break down digital accessibility in a way that feels practical and connected to real-world examples.
You can find more episodes and additional resources at disabilityrightsflorida.org/podcast.
And if this discussion resonated with you, please share it with your community.
Disability Deep Dive is a podcast that is brought to you by Disability Rights Florida, where real conversations about life, culture, and ideas meet the lived disability experience. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us at disabilityrightsflorida.org/podcast.